On August 22, 2007, the Texas Rangers beat the Baltimore Orioles 30-3. Most of us consider this the record for most runs scored by a single team in baseball's modern era. But is it really? The Chicago Colts beat the Louisville Colonels 36-7 on June 29, 1897, in one of the craziest games of all time. And man, oh man, this game is strange. Okay, first off, we really need to talk about the elephant in the room. Why is it that we consider the modern era of baseball to begin in 1901? Why don't we consider things in the 1890s to also be part of the modern era? Let's talk about some of these rules really quick, alright? The one rule change I could find that would potentially disqualify, say, 1897, 1898, and so on from being the modern era is the foul strike rule. That is the rule where if you foul a pitch off, it counts as a strike up to 2 strikes against the batter. That was instituted in 1901, but only in the National League at first. It didn't go to the American League until 1903. Now, that's kind of finicky, I think, to call that the defining factor of the modern era of baseball. When we look at other rules, we can see that they were already around in 1897. For example, the infield fly rule came about in 1895. The rule of 60 feet 6 inches from the pitcher's mound to the plate, well, that came about in 1893. A lot of people talk about, oh, well, back then it took more than 4 balls to be a walk. No, 4 balls for a walk, that came around in 1889. What about 3 strikes for a strikeout? That came about in 1880. It went away for a year in 1886 and then came back. Now, many of us who take baseball history really seriously consider 1893 to be the beginning of the modern era. 1901 is what people use because you remember that the American League came about in 1901, but then you ignore the fact that there was an American League in 1900, and anyway, it gets complicated. And so, in that spirit, let's talk about what might be the worst baseball game in the modern era. Louisville came into this game with a 20-32 record, decimated by injuries. Chicago didn't exactly field a great team either, having won 19 and lost 34 before this game. Now, it's a little bit difficult to describe this game. That's primarily because the sports writers in 1897 refused to do so. Or, as the Louisville Courier-Journal wrote, to attempt to give a detailed description of the game would be to invade the realm of farce comedy and would moreover be unnecessarily humiliating to the participants who have troubles enough now for several weeks. Now, one thing about this game will strike modern fans as bizarre right from the start. Chicago elected to bat first despite being the home team. 23-year-old Chick Fraser, in his second year, started for the Colonels. Fraser, who was born in Chicago, would later pitch for the 1908 Cubs. He certainly didn't have the best game of his career here. He didn't last 3 full innings and he gave up 14 runs in the process. Fraser was relieved by Jim Jones, who made his only appearance as a pitcher in all of 1897. Now, if you want to talk about an innings eater, this was the original. Jones pitched the rest of the game, allowing 22 runs, 14 earned in the process. After this game, Jones did pinch hit on July 9, 1897, and then was sent to the minor league team in Paducah after all that. Man, talk about a rough rookie season. The top of the 5th inning saw one of the strangest plays in baseball history. The Colts had runners on first and second with 1 man out. Jim Connor, the runner on second, inexplicably decided to steal third base. Third baseman Charlie Dexter tried to tag him out, but Connor was called safe. Dexter protested loud and long. According to multiple accounts of the game, the umpire told Dexter that he normally would have thrown him out of the game, but that he wouldn't do it this time since Louisville didn't have any more players on the bench. Batter Bill Everett then hit a ground ball to short. When James Stafford, the shortstop, threw Everett out at first, Connor crossed the plate with what should have been the 19th run for Chicago. The umpire, however, lost count of the number of outs as well as all the players on the field. The fans, however, knew the score and yelled out their displeasure. Now, this was back in the awful days of only one umpire, mind you. The umpire, looking for a way out of the mess, announced in the end that Connor was called out for cutting third base. As far as I know, this is the only game in baseball history in which a player was called out for cutting the base that he was standing on. Louisville, which was already decimated by injuries, suffered 2 particularly gruesome injuries in this game. Catcher Dick Butler was injured badly by a collision at the plate in the 2nd inning. He remained in the game because there was no substitute on the bench. Later on, Cap Anson smacked a ground ball to second base. This was during the 7th inning. The ball hit Abby Johnson right in the face. Newspaper reports indicated that Johnson's eye was bleeding and that he might lose it entirely. Now, from what I can tell, none of that happened. Johnson's eye survived. In fact, he pinch hit for Louisville on July 14th and started at second base against New York on July 17th. Meanwhile, for Chicago, left fielder George Decker was struck in the side of the head by a pitch in the 7th inning. He left the game, though the newspapers report that he never lost consciousness. Decker, oddly enough, wound up playing for Louisville in 1898 as well as the first part of 1899. All in all, Chicago wound up with 36 runs on 30 hits, taking advantage of 10 Louisville errors and 10 walks. The Colonels scored 7 runs on 14 hits. Now, there are 2 more facts about this game that are remarkable and surprising. First, as crazy as it seems, Louisville actually won this 3-game series. The Colonels had won the day before and ended up winning on June 30th, the day after. And second, I strongly suspect that the injury situation in Louisville is what prompted their ownership to shell out $2,500 for a tall, lanky kid in Paterson, New Jersey. That kid's name? Honus Wagner. And there you have it, today's candidate for baseball's worst.